So there's a story actually today, a very interesting story that talks about just looking at how much we import from these two countries as Kenya, Russia and Ukraine. The country imports billions of shillings worth of machines used by manufacturers, construction materials, raw materials for making packaging bags used by retailers. Of the 40.6 billion shillings products Kenya imported from Russia in 2020, based on data submitted to UN Comtrade, it's a repository of official international trade statistics, wheat constituted 16.5 billion shillings, maize 989 million shillings, fertilizer 4.9 billion shillings. Of the 8 billion shillings commodities Kenya imported from Ukraine in the same year 2020, according to the same database, soybeans constituted 1.8 billion shillings, wheat and maize 1 billion shillings, vegetables 655 million, sunflower seed and cotton seed oil 434 million. Kenya also imported semi-finished iron and steel products worth 11.9 billion shillings, bars and rods worth 1.5 billion shillings, aluminium valued at 853 million shillings. It imported iron and steel from Ukraine worth 4.45 billion shillings. These products are essential in the production and construction industries. The retail sector imports more than 1 billion shillings worth of craft paper and paperboard from Russia, which are used in making shopping bags, among other items. Yesterday, Ukraine's ambassador to Kenya, Andriy Praventki, warned that should the conflict between his country and Russia escalate, Kenya would feel the impact. He said students who want to study in Ukraine would lose opportunities while those already there could be forced to leave. Direct implications. Everybody has talked about the implication globally to energy, right? Energy prices could soar. We've already seen oil prices globally going up. IPRA, we know, says Kenya, our reserve only runs out for 10 days. So we are likely to feel an impact immediately in the global rising fuel prices. Let's bring in somebody to help us analyze this conversation. Ibrahima Kane is the African liaison for the Open Society Institute in West Africa and the African Union, talking about the African perspective on this particular conflict. Ibrahima, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation. Welcome to SpiceFM. We call that the hot seat. But because you're our friend and you're coming to help us understand these things, it's not going to be so hot for you.
No problem. I'm ready for that.
Tell us about the Open Society Institute, especially the work that you do in West Africa, and whether the Open Society Institute has any, globally, has done any work in Ukraine or in this particular...
Well, Open Society Foundation is a foundation created by George Soros. We are a global foundation. We have offices in Africa in 3 regions, West, Southern, and Eastern Africa. Our regional office is based here in Nairobi. And we also have offices in Europe, in eastern part of Europe, in Latin America, in Asia. Our biggest objective is to open societies, to really make sure that democracy prevails in all the region of the world. And of course, what is happening in Ukraine now is of concern because it's not only about the powerful countries trying to do what they want in the world, where normally we should have international law, organizing the relationship between states, not the powerful being the right people. And also there are a number of issues that we really dealing with: democracy, good governance, respect for human rights, economic justice. So we are dealing with a big number of issues in the world, in Africa and elsewhere. And we're trying also to look at the comparative perspective, the South's relationship with the North, and how we can make sure that in those relationships, each part takes also, has a benefit of those relationships. So those are the main drivers of our work.
Specific to Ukraine, has the Open Society Foundation, George Soros, been involved in that push, like you say, it's democratization? For example, the 2014 protests in Kiev that led to the exit and the fleeing of a president and then the new administration. Have Open Society, been participating in this?
Well, Our work, particularly in Europe, is really the eastern part of Europe, the Europe that was occupied, a few years ago by the Soviet Union. Work is really to help those countries to come back to a kind of normality, respect for human rights, democracy, rule of law. So in that regard, I think there is also an important aspect to highlight here is the fact that George Soros is George Soros, but the foundation that we have is our foundation run by people who are, working in a particular context, using particular tools to really make sure that democracy as we see it, we live it and we feel it. And that's why our intervention, either in Africa or in Europe, are the same. We always try to make sure that the power of people is felt and, respected by those who believe that they can still continue to run the world in their way.
With what we've seen yesterday, even, look, if we're to be honest, from what we've seen from 2014 until the culmination then of this final, move that led to this action coming from the Kremlin, in the words of Putin, and then we saw after that this attack. What does it mean then? We've seen already people fleeing. What does it mean for the people? How do we see it for the people who are sitting in Ukraine or trying to leave Ukraine at this moment? And then for those of us who are watching from the periphery around the world, who are looking at this and saying, okay, for every action, there is a reaction. What happens here on the continent, if we're looking at it from an African perspective, as we look at the people in Ukraine who are clearly taking the short end of the stick from this action?
Well, there are different aspects to highlight when it comes to Africa. African countries, since the creation of the OAU, have always organized their relationship based on a number of principles. Respect of state sovereignty, respect of the integrity of the territory of the state, and also relationship based on, good faith and organizing the relationship in the way that when there are problems, they are sorted out in a very democratic but also peaceful manner. What we are seeing in Ukraine is the contrary of all of that. So that's why you've seen many African countries condemning strongly, and I think what Kenya representative at the UN did was to strongly condemn what was happening, because it just show that powerful countries still undermine international law. That's one aspect. The second aspect is that what we have seen in that region is a practice that also exists in our continent. I don't even need to go very far. Kenya. You remember Kenya put a lot of forces at the border with Somalia in the past, threatening Somalia if the government behave in a certain way, they will invade the face. It's the same practice, because look at Egypt, for instance, in Libya. Libya is a completely disorganized state. Egypt continuing to play an important role and even threatening to invade the country if a certain group is left to take the power. So those practices also exist on the continent. The third element, and I think you alluded to it when you were explaining the impact of this crisis on our continent. Russia is an important actor on our continent. Maybe in the eastern part you don't feel it, but in the western part of the continent, in the southern part, Russia contributed, supported, liberation movement on the continent. In Angola, in Southern Africa, in West Africa, many Africans were trained in Russia. So Russia still have, really strong relationship with the continent. And above all, you see just in recent years, Russia organizing, like many other countries, Russia-Africa meeting.
Yep.
Russia now involved in politics in Central African Republic, recently in Mali. Those are also the situation that African states have to look, to take care of while, reacting to the current
this. Let's actually get into greater detail on the implications of what's happening in Russia, on the implications of the global sanctions being imposed on Russia, those implications on Africa, African countries, like you're saying. Very many of them are friendly to Russia. Very many of them have close economic and social ties and political ties as well to Russia. Ibrahima Kane is the Africa Liaison at the Open Society Institute for West Africa and also at the African Union.
Well, there is a lot of criticism on the AU, and I take those criticisms. But don't forget that the AU is a very young organization. OAU started in 1963 up to 2003, and the AU is since 2003 is trying to reorganize the way African countries relate to each other. So it's not a long story, and that can also explain why we are here. Second point, leadership. Leadership at the continental level. When we talk about international organization, usually we say international organizations are not like satellites. Satellite, when you put them somewhere, they stay there until something happens. International organization life is also related to the leadership that is there. When you look at AU, the way AU was performing during Alpha Conare period is different from the AU, where the AU was operating during Faki or during Mrs. Zuma's period. That leadership is also very important in the conduct of African affairs. The third point that I would like to highlight is also the leadership of other states. We have 5 big states. We used to have 5 big states, namely Nigeria, South Africa, Algeria, Egypt, and Libya, because they were contributing for 75% to the budget of the AU. Some of them, Libya is no longer a state.
Yep.
And some of the big states were, going through troubles. Algeria, South Africa. That also explains why we are here today. But I believe that, despite all those problems, the fact that Africa has now a clear idea, a clear vision of where it wants to go, the Agenda 2063, with 7 aspirations. If those aspirations are implemented, things will change on the continent. And the AU staff should not be just an AU issue. It should be an African issue. All of you in this room should also play a role, particularly the media, because we need to believe in ourselves. Don't forget that we were colonized for 200th century.
Yeah.
And colonization itself changed a lot in the way that you behave. We need to decolonize our, look at our school.
Yeah.
Look at the way we're still running into system that was set up by former colonial masters. It's changing in few countries. If I look at your education system at the moment, it's one of the best on the continent. I look at this space, I can only see African operating in this place, but go to many other African countries. The former colonial are still controlling the issue. You remember the big problem between Mali and France was related to the fact that France wanted to always control the thing.
Right.
So let's believe in ourselves. Let's also try to make sure that the African Union is the only institution that we have. We make it work.
If we were to cast our eyes on a futuristic situation, Ibrahima, and say that if we're looking at the way in which it ought to be able, because I think from the first reactions that we saw, although China being extremely quiet here, what you would call the big guns making the United States saying what it has been saying over time, France saying what it has been saying, the United Kingdom, back and forth, Great Britain saying what they have been saying. Are you saying that if the African Union and African countries, having had all their ducks in a row, futuristically, then also would be at this table being able to say things, condemn situations, make an opinion, and then be heard or regarded.
Yes, you talked about the US, you talked about France. These countries, in this particular situation, should not be teaching us anything. The US has invaded Iraq 2 times in clear violation of international law. When they went to the UN to try to get a UN resolution, they failed. And despite that failure, they decided to invade Iraq because they were pursuing their own interests. I can give you many examples of France, pursuing its own interests in Africa or in many other reasons. These are not states that could teach us how to behave. But for the African continent, I believe that we have our ideas, we have our vision on how international relationships should be. And it's based on that vision, I think. African countries for the last 20 years were always criticizing the way international relationships were organized. And they were claiming that they need to have a permanent seat at the UN level to really be part of the conversation. 55 countries, and don't forget that we have countries like South Africa, Egypt, Algeria. They are not
Big
small
economies.
countries. Even Kenya, when you look at it somehow, it's a country that can also play an important role in international law. So our claim for more democratic space in international relationship, I think, is valid.
Do you
important.
think, Ibrahima, that this crisis then is an open door for Africa? Is this an opportunity for Africa to exert itself?
Exactly. That's what I was saying.
How do we do that?
Well, it's for African countries, African leaders, particularly the AU, to take this opportunity. There will be conversation at the UN level, UN security. Don't forget that we have 3 representatives at the UN Security Council at the moment. The UN General Assembly will be meeting to discuss some of these issues. This is a momentum to really open up the conversation on other aspects of international relationship. Because up to now, international relationship is based on the fact that those who are powerful are those who are right. When it comes to respect for international law, it's just the small countries, the weak countries that really pursue the respect for international law.
And here's an opportunity where those powerful, those right, are now fighting amongst themselves.
Yes.
One big right versus other big rights, and the big rights who are feeling that they are on the receiving end are not even able to retaliate properly and say, we are going to come in and protect the people of Ukraine like they did with the people of Kuwait. So how can Africa then exert itself? And like you say, if this is an opportunity for Africa to come out and be the one region that sorted out the issue, the global crisis in Ukraine, how can we go about it?
Well, we can go about it in many manners. First, to really come up as 55 countries with some very clear ideas on how we want to see international relationship. 2, this also offers an opportunity to really look at again our relationship with even our former master. The Mali crisis, people are just looking at it as one of the crises in Africa. But for the first time, an African country has decided to expel the ambassador of a former colonial power. Mali is also an example of where the former colonial master came to try to impose its rule, claiming that they are helping the country. And now the Mali government has decided to ask the French military to leave the country. Those 2 examples show that we are also able to change the narrative. We are also able to change, and you will see the impact of those 2 measures taken by the military in Mali. because it gives pride to many Africans. To that, in fact, we used to look at that powerful, but they are not so powerful. So the Mali experience, the fact that now, during our conversation with the EU recently, last week, we also really forced the EU to go in a certain way. In the past, they used to tell us what to do. They even used to prepare the communique before the meeting. But this time, 1 week before the beginning of the meeting, we didn't have an agenda.
Which meeting is this?
The AU-EU meeting in Brussels.
Right.
We didn't have. So things are changing on the continent. So that's why I say this is the momentum to really use those examples to really start changing our relationship with the West. But we should not use this momentum to think that we will replace one powerful country with another one. For example, in Mali, to replace France by Russia. No. The idea is to use that momentum to change, to look at again our relationship with external world. Africa is the only region in the world where countries like Turkey, countries like South Korea can really ask all of us to go and meet with them. China, Russia,
Japan.
the US, Japan, I think this is the momentum to change that rationale. And if we change that way of behaving, it will have an impact on the way Africa is perceived at the international level.
Do you think that in addition to this momentum, if we're talking of it, should also be an opportunity for the leadership on this continent to actually understand and put into practice strong democratic practices within their own boundaries?
It's all related. It's all related because personally I believe that it's only by democratizing our society, by making sure that the will of people is respected, rather than who is our connection at the international level, that we can make the change. And it has started. We just need to strengthen, to use those first signs that we have in many places. How do you think that the Mali government decided to act in certain way with France? It's because they get the support of the people. So if you get the support of the people, you can do a lot.
You see, the unfortunate thing is that our lived experience is that on this continent, the people give support to the leadership. And what has been consistent to the point of it being endemic is the leadership then lets down the people consistently. They get into power, there are signs that they're going to bring about change, there's talk about change that they're going to bring, and then when they've entrenched themselves, within a short time, the population realizes that we're not even back where we started. We're probably even worse off than we were before.
Yes, but at the same time, this is I can say this period is also the period where our people are more educated. Our people know better what is happening in the world. It was not like that 10 or 15 years ago. And in many countries, let me come back to the Kenyan situation. Look at the way today Kenyan are seeing the politician and the politics in Kenya. When you see for ID issues, people are now going to court and are successful in dealing with those issues. It shows you that something is changing in our continent, that people are more educated, they know better the issues than the politician, and that they can also derail some of the projects that the politician are thinking. Kenya, Mali, South Africa, if you put all these things together, you realize that this is a continent that can really make a lot of changes. But as long as we respect democratic principles, as long as we...
Ibrahima, do you think then it calls for a different kind of democracy? Because when we talk about democratization of countries, then it seems as though we are trying to fit into an already prescribed template from the West. Do you think we need our own We need to define our own kind of democracy. Because even as we look at it now, look at Ukraine, look at Russia. The people within the country probably don't have the same ethos as the leaders.
Yes. But, Madam...
But we don't hear it.
Yes, Madam, you know, we all come in humanity through a particular culture, isn't it? So the way, if you look at democracy today in the world, the way it operates in the US is different from the way it operates in the UK, is different from the way it operates in Japan, is different from the way it operates in France. So in Africa, it's also really clear that the way it operates in a country like Mali will be different from the way it operates in Kenya.
Yeah.
You know, and our trajectory are not the same, and also our culture are not the same. So we need to base what we are doing about democratizing our society through what are our strengths. You know, and I also believe that, you know, democracy, it's a number of principles. You know, equality, non-discrimination, full participation of people, you know, respect of a number of norms, rule of law. So if those are implemented in countries, so we can get there. We can get there. Maybe the rhythm will not be the same from one country to another one, given the peculiarity of the country.
And that's okay.
But yes, we will get there.
You know, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
You know, when you say we have a far more educated population in the country, it is true. But I don't know what it is. I don't know which country it is that you come from. Which country do you come from?
I come from Senegal.
Okay, from Senegal. Now, Senegal is a beautiful country, a rich history. We in Kenya also say we have a rich history, and we have, for instance, one of the most educated parliaments we've ever had in our history. They have performed dismally. If you look at issues that pertain to the interest of the common man, we have many laws that have been passed that you could consider good. Some of them are clearly partisan. But that conversation has been, our parliament has been held captive by the executive. Now, this is an independent body that is supposed to oversight the executive. They are educated. The number of lawyers in that parliament, for every stone you throw, you'll probably hit 3 or 4 lawyers. What I'm saying is, this cultural change, this societal change that we talk about in this continent, I'm not saying it cannot happen. I'm simply saying that education alone doesn't do it. And where I agree with you is this. It's the people, beyond the leadership that they've elected, who need to understand that they have a far bigger role of oversighting even the people they have elected together with the executive that they have elected. Because looking at change to come from the elected body that we have, in this country, no, I fear that is not where change is going to come from.
Well, don't say that. Don't say that. You know,
don't give up, City.
Yeah. No, don't give up. You know, I come from a country where elections started in the 19th century. In 1848, that's where, in the 4 cities that were occupied by French at that time on the territory of Senegal, we started election.
Yes.
Almost 200 years. But I can't say that the way our democratic system is operating is far better than the Kenyan one. You know, but what I can say is more and more people are getting power and people are imposing their voice, they desire to the politician. It takes time. You know, when you look at the Western democracy, the American democracy started in the 17th century.
Yes,
century. So they have that experience, the long experience that we don't have. I'm not saying that for us we have to wait 200 years, but we have educated population. We have people like you, the media, all the different sectors of our society that also have an important role to play. If they understand that role, I think we can really move the boundaries very quickly. And that's why, for example, in Senegal, when we had a leader called Abdoulaye Wade, who fought for 25 years and later on became president. And when he tried to organize, and he was very, very popular, powerful, but when he tried to have a 3rd term, It's the population itself that went to and decided, that it won't happen. So that tells you about, if our population is well educated, know what they want, we will get there. We will get there, and I think all the different sections of our society have a role to play. Devolution here, you can say, it has not been successful, but it has changed a lot of things in this country. And that is how we should be, and maybe in the next 10 years, we will see it differently.
So it's many steps.
Many steps.
Many steps, but we are heading in the right direction.
Heading in the right direction, but all the different actors should play a role. Particularly, I'm here with the media. The media should play an important role in that regard. And I think it's important.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. As we conclude, what one thing would you like to see coming out of the AU today with regards to the ongoing crisis in Ukraine that would then give you that full confidence that, yes, we are going to take advantage of this particular opportunity?
Well, I think to walk the talk. When I read the AU communique, it's really nice. But I don't think that AU member states are behaving like that, many of them. So for me, it's for the AU as a regional organization to really make sure that African states respect, the sovereignty of other states, and also African states do things in the way that really help to ensure that the AU vision is implemented.
Is realized. Ibrahima Kane has been our guest this hour. He is the Africa liaison for the AU from the Open Society Institute for West Africa. Thank you very much for joining us today. We thank you very much for coming and shedding the light on what you see as the opportunities for Africa, what you see as a journey that Africa can take in occupying its rightful space in global politics.
Thank you for inviting a Senegalese to the conversation.